So we actually know this pretty well in real life. But let's start with where the term drag coefficient originated from. So if you've seen Indy 500 or any of these car races, you have cars going at incredible speeds, and you look at your own car, it looks a little different. What's the difference, right? So Lamborghini just came out with the new Countach, and if you look at it, it's striking. Why is it striking? Well, it's because it's highly aerodynamic. And what does that mean technically? Aerodynamic means that the drag coefficient, which is the amount of resistance posed by the car as it moves, is captured by the drag coefficient. So the drag coefficient is low, means there's very little friction as it's moving, because it's slicing through air. And if it can slice like a sharp knife, then the drag coefficient is very low. So in other words, the car can go very, very fast because the drag coefficient is low. So it's highly aerodynamic. If we were to look at our own life, we too are constantly moving through life, right? It's of course we're physically moving, but even otherwise we are moving through a series of experiences. So our beingness is being constantly exposed through a series of events and experiences. So we are moving through this, and these experiences generate within us some resistance because of the friction. So sometimes something happens and we feel, well, wait a minute, I don't like that, I don't want to deal with that, I don't want to face that, and that is wrong, etc. So we have this resistance. Usually we see this as an attribute of something outside of us. We feel, oh, if this hadn't happened, I would have been fine. In reality, this resistance is an internal thing, much like the car's drag coefficient is an inherent attribute of the car itself. It's not an attribute of the wind that's blowing as it moves through space. So similarly, our resistance is actually an internal thing. The events are merely exposing that internal resistance, and it shows up as friction. So we feel this friction going through life, where we feel like, oh, this shouldn't be happening, I don't like it, why is this happening to me, etc. And the friction generates heat, much like it does in a car that's moving. Internally, we feel this heat, we sense it as, it could feel as anger, it could feel as any one of the negative emotions, which we feel is very unpleasant. We don't need to read a book for that. We know this is not feeling good. So this is a sign of friction, this is a sign of internal resistance, and an important takeaway is it's shining a light that your drag coefficient maybe is higher than you think, because that's what's causing all this friction. And the friction takes away from the aerodynamic flow. So more we have friction, the more the flow is disturbing, it's chaotic. And life does not feel that great when it has a lot of friction. So drag coefficient, when applied to the journey of transformation, it translates to introspect about your own drag coefficient, your own internal resistance, and notice how much friction is there in your life. And take responsibility for that and see how you can systematically chip away at this internal resistance and reduce your drag coefficient, and you will see how in a few years you may have a very similar experience to something that happened in the past, and you will sail through it so beautifully that at the end of it, you will be like, wait a minute, I know I had something like this happen, and I got all bent out of shape 3 years back, but now it's just a mere annoyance, or maybe it's not even that, and I'm smiling at the end of this experience. So that says you've done a great job of reducing your drag coefficient. When you choose light, life becomes increasingly joyful, purposeful, and inspired. I invite you to join me to explore the realms of light, the infinite possibilities that light offers.